What up, YouTube? It's your boy, ATrueHero. And today, I got a special guest. I refer to him as Ghostrider the Whip, but you might know him as Ghostrider. Ghostrider, thank you for coming on the channel. You want to tell him about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. So I'm Ghostrider, as some of you may know. Uh, so I've been playing this game for quite some time now. I started playing since like 2010. That's when I actually started playing competitively. And yeah, since then I've just been enjoying Yu-Gi-Oh in general. Like I play so many different formats. I just like Yu-Gi-Oh in general.
You are a force to be reckoned with in several formats. You've topped GOAT tournaments, you've topped Edison tournaments, you've even topped hat tournaments. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, about when you started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and what is your favorite format as well?
So the first time I ever played Yu-Gi-Oh, I was a kid. It was back in like uh when the Yu-Gi starter deck just came out and the Kaiba starter deck. I was like very, very casual, like most other kids. But
Right.
yeah, it was like around 2010 when I actually took the game more serious. And I I would say my favorite format is Duelist Alliance format. Like that format is really meaningful to me because it was the first time I topped the regional.
Yes. No one ever forgets their first time.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, when you say Duelist Alliance format, of course, some people might not be familiar, but what were the top decks in that format?
So in that format, the top decks were Burning Abyss, Shadal, and Satellar Knight.
Ah, yes. I remember that. During that format, Sean McCabe found a lot of success with Stellar Knights.
Yeah, yeah, I remember.
Now, we are here to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! And we're here to talk about you and your success. You, as I've said before, have done so well in all of these different formats. How does it feel to be such an accomplished duelist already?
Feels good. It feels good. Like every time I do well in something that I took the time to actually practice and put in the effort, it feels good to get rewarded.
Now, something a lot of people may not know is you recently joined the perfect team, Perfect Circle. And at this event, there were 4 players in the top 8 on Perfect Circle. So not only have you seen a lot of success, but even your team has been seeing a lot of success. How does it feel to be a Perfect Circle member?
It's awesome, you know, when you have a group of guys that know what they're doing in the game, it makes things a lot easier. You have people you can play test with that know what they're doing. You can you can theory with them, and it just makes the whole process a lot easier to top more events.
I agree. I agree. And it's an honor to have you on the team. I'm proud to be a Perfect Circle member myself. Now, we can see right before us, this is the deck that you chose to play, Dragon Turbo, which you are known for playing. Why did you decide to play Dragon Turbo?
So I'm really comfortable with this deck. I like playing this deck because of all the draw power. And I before Edison format, I was playing Goat format, and in in Goat format, I like to play a lot of draw power as well, like cards like Jar of Greeds, Upstart Goblins. So when I first started playing Edison format, I wanted to find a deck that uses as much draw power as possible as well. So I stumbled upon this deck, and I just been using it ever since.
Did you get any inspiration from Hydro Pump?
Yeah, yeah, I remember the first time I saw Hydro Pump playing this deck, and that's when I was interested in actually learning how to play it. There wasn't much resources back then on how to play this deck. The only way you can actually learn to play it is by watching Hydro Pump play. That was basically it.
That's right. So Hydro Pump walked so that you could run because you are, without a doubt, the most successful Dragon Turbo player as of now in Edison format. So people should be watching you. And guys, I'm going to say it now. If you're not already, please go and subscribe to Ghostrider because he has a ton of videos on Dragon Turbo and how to play, and especially check out his recent video about his deck profile if you really want to learn how to play this deck. Going forward, would you make any changes to your deck, or do you think it's already perfect as is?
So the only change I would probably make is I would put the giant Trunade back in the main deck because there's times when Stardust Dragon can be really difficult to deal with if I don't have Giant Trunade in the main. And Giant Trunade also just makes it a lot easier to be able to OTK.
True, true. Stardust Dragon definitely could be a problem because you can't reliably get rid of cards. And Stardust Dragon is just one of those cards. Well, he's a dragon himself, but he's funny. He's kind of like the dragon that not necessarily beats, but it can put up a good fight against dragon decks.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I'm not too familiar with Dragon Turbo from the perspective of playing it, but how do you play out of your bad hand, your bricked hands? Because a problem with Dragon Turbo, and the reason why a lot of people didn't respect it, was because they said it's a deck that draws dead, and you kind of gotta get lucky, like a casino deck.
Right. So when you draw bad hands, uh, you you just have to try to stall it out as much as possible. Sometimes you have to hold your Tragodia and wait until they just start attacking you, and then you drop it when you still have like about 6 cards in hand. So it's a big wall. It's hard to get over. And also, if you're able to stall enough to draw something like Future Fusion or Card Destruction, then you're back in the game.
Right. Now, you actually mentioned an important stall card, Tragodia. It's actually kind of the only lines of defense that Dragon Turbo decks plays. Is there any reason why this type of deck doesn't play Gores?
So yeah, I'm not a big fan of Gores because I like playing Reckless Greed. I think Reckless Greed is very important to be able to have success with this deck. And if you're setting Reckless Greed and you have Gores in your hand, you actually have to use the Reckless Greed during their turn when they attack. And I don't think that's optimal because you're gonna see one less draw when you do that because you have to skip your draw phase. So I think it's not worth playing Gorse for that reason. I'd rather draw an extra card.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So is Reckless a card that you keep in both games 2 and 3?
Um, it depends on the matchup. There are some matchups where you can get punished for actually keeping the Reckless Greed. Like for example, uh, a deck that plays Raiko or Caius can actually punish you for keeping Reckless Greed going second. But if they're not playing cards like Raiko or Caius, then it's okay to keep the Reckless going second.
So generally, what matchups do you think Dragon Turbo has a hard time against? You mentioned earlier about Stardust can be a problem, so I guess decks that have easy access to Stardust. But outside of that, what are some troublesome matchups for Dragon Turbo?
I would say the matchup that I do struggle with the most would be Blackwings because it's very easy for Blackwing players to get rid of cards like Red Eyes or Quackimiro Drago because they can run it over with Sirocco or Kalut.
I see. Would you say that it has a difficult matchup against Vayu Turbo? Because Vayu Turbo also has access to those cards too, but of course there's no Kalut, right? But they can pump up cards with Sirocco, such as they can bring out an Arm Wing, pump up with Sirocco. Or would you say the Vayu Turbo match is a bit easier? Because it also plays cards like you mentioned as Raiko. And Vayu Turbo, as we know, is the most successful deck in modern Edison times, and it even came in both first and second place at this event. So how is that matchup?
I would say it's slightly easier than Blackwing. It's still not favorable, but it's not as bad as Blackwing because Blackwing they play Black Whirlwind, and that card, if they draw that right away and I don't open like really broken, then they don't give me enough time to set up because they just go special summon Bora, activate Kalu, and they don't give me enough time to set up. Whereas Vayu Turbo doesn't play Black Whirlwind, so
Right.
usually they give me more time to actually set up the OTK.
That makes a lot of sense. It's funny because during my interview with Ludo, I asked him, what advice would you give to newer Blackwing players to see success? And his answer was, draw Black Whirlwind more. So I mean, you're right. That is the troublesome card when you're facing against Blackwings. You know, they can have the Icarus, they can have the Shora, but if they open up the Whirlwind, it's like, okay, this duel, this game is going to be a nightmare. What are some easy matchups? Like matchups when you play, it's like, okay, this is free for Dragon Turbo.
So the matchups that I really like playing against are Hero Beat, Fairies, and Frogs. Those are the best matchups for Dragon Turbo.
Oh, Frogs. That's an interesting one, especially because that is one of the top decks. Hero Beat, of course, is a top deck as well, but unfortunately, Hero Beat doesn't really see the success that it should. It hasn't won a major event yet. But Frogs have been doing very well. What makes the matchup against Frogs easy? Is it because it's like a slow deck and it gives you time to set up?
Yeah, and also because they don't really play much back row, they rely more on cards like Battle Fader and Tragodia and Gores. So those cards I really don't care too much about because I play Drago.
Right. That's right. All three of those cards are all dark monsters, so Drago just says no. Well,
right.
Speaking about your tournament experience itself, so not just general matchups, but what was your easiest round, you would say? Of course, I know no round was particularly like super free because you were playing against some of the best players in the world, right? So this isn't a disrespect to them, but what would you say still you didn't have a difficult time playing against in the tournament?
I would say it was my round one match against Frogs. So game one, I did open up really well, and it is a favorable matchup for me. So I was able to OTK him by turn 2 or 3. And game two, I sided in my Masker Restricts, which made it very difficult for him to do much.
Right. Massacre Restrict is an underrated card. I personally sided in Diva Hero against the Frog matchup, but a lot of people opt for pulling the rug. Is there any particular reason why you chose Master Restrict over pulling the rug?
So I like that it's a floodgate, and also because it puts my opponent in a very awkward position. They have to decide if they want to keep in cards like Heavy Storm against me just to get rid of the Masker Restrict. But if I don't even draw the Masker Restrict, then the Heavy Storm is just a dead card for them.
Right. That makes sense. And that's actually my logic as well. I mean, of course, Diva Hero plays more back rows, but still, I would prefer to have a floodgate that stops multiple cards, such as Substitute, Enemy Controller, Tributing for a Monarch, Soul Exchange, etc., rather than just having one card, such as pulling the rug, which only stops the summon of a Monarch. Moreover, Diva Hero and even Dragon Turbo to an extent loses against Vanity's Fiend. And pulling the rug does not stop Vanity's Fiend. Whereas if you have a Master Restrict up, they can't even begin to summon that card.
Right, yeah, that's another reason that Masker Restrict is better than pulling the rug in my deck.
What would you say your most difficult or hardest round was during the event?
I would say my top 8 match against my teammate Yondemi.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, he's really good with Blackwing, so it's a bad matchup, and I'm playing against a really good player. So yeah, it's just a difficult match.
I mean, he's definitely one of the Blackwing goats. Like him and Ludo. I mean, they both made top 8 with Blackwings, and he's even #1 ranked on the ladder. But interestingly enough, he mostly got there with Hero Frogs. But still, as you mentioned, he is one of the most proficient Blackwing players, so that is an understandable loss. If you had to pick one card that was like the MVP card, that like you drew this card and that was the reason why you were taking game after game? What would be that MVP card?
I would have to say the MVP card for this tournament was Super Rejuvenation.
I had a feeling you would say that.
Yeah, there was like so many times when I was down in card advantage. It wasn't looking good for me, but Super Rejuvenation, draw like 5, and then draw into another Super Rejuvenation, keep Tragodia in my hand. That way I don't lose the next turn. And then when it goes back to my turn, I OTK them.
Super Rejuvenation is kind of like a modern card because it's so broken. The fact that you can draw up to like 5 or 20 or even in some cases more cards than that, it's just crazy. Like that card, they were not thinking about Dragon Turbo when it was printed.
Right. They really weren't. Back then, Dragon Turbo wasn't a thing, so they just didn't have that in mind.
Now, as you are the Dragon Turbo GOAT, right? Like I said, Hydro Pump walked so that you could run. What advice would you give for anyone who wants to pick up Dragon Turbo?
I think the best advice I can give to new Dragon Turbo players is don't get frustrated when you lose, because it's not an easy deck to pilot. So there's going to be a lot of misplays along the way as you're learning. So, don't get discouraged. Don't let it bother you that you're not winning at first. But once you actually master and learn the deck really well, you can top a lot of events, and it's very rewarding.
If you had to put Dragon Turbo in a tier list, right? Like S tier being the highest, A being the next highest, and so on and so forth, right? Where would you put Dragon Turbo?
I would say it's like at the bottom of S tier or at the top of A tier. Like either way, you can put it in one of those two.
Yeah, I would have to be inclined to agree. And I think your success with the deck has shown that it's true. Because previously, people would say that it wasn't even a top deck. But you, and even there was a player recently who won RBT Morano Valley with Dragon Turbo, have shown that Dragon Turbo is not a deck that you should take lightly. And I think another reason why it's seen a lot of success is because people have taken it lightly, they didn't even put anything in their side deck for it. Would you say like there's particularly like a side card that people sided against you either in this event or events you've entered in the past that really hurt you, or no?
So I'm not really worried about that many cards because I do cite a lot of answers to most of them.
Right.
Yeah, so I would say like the only one that I do really hate to see is like deck devastation virus because it's really hard to respond to that because they activate it right away before you actually do anything, so you can't really respond.
Yeah, DDV is a good one. DDV is definitely a good one. Well, I mean, I think that you've pretty much answered all the questions about Dragon Turbo. You've had an immensely favorable tournament run. I can't wait to see which event you'll top next, which event you'll win next. So I have to ask you, do you have any shout outs?
Yeah. So shout outs to all my teammates in Team Perfect Circle. All of them are really great at this game. Fantastic. And also shout out to my GOAT format teammates as well. LaBounty, Fancy Diesel. Yeah, so shout out to all of them.
Some of the best players in the game. Well, guys, like I said before, please, and especially if you've made it this far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Ghostrider's channel. He has so much more Dragon Turbo content and just general good Yu-Gi-Oh content. So if you like Yu-Gi-Oh and you want to improve, subscribe to his channel. Thanks again, man. It's been a pleasure having you. And with that, ATrueHero out. Peace.
Subscribe or you too will be sent to the Shadow Realm.